any rational person who goes over there and sees what it's doing, and you see, I don't care if it's Russian or Ukrainian, if it's a 17-year-old boy who's been chewed up by a bloody machine gun, I guarantee you will pretty quickly drop the bullshit facade of, oh, fuck those orcs or fuck those Ukrops or whatever side you're on. Imagine that Mexico is looking at an arms deal with China. How fucking quickly before you think that went through would America be lining up the Marines on the border going, fuck, we cannot let China. So if you're not disgusted by two developed nations going head to head in a meat grinder of men, if you're not disgusted by that, you've got a fucking problem. Like, I can reason with anything. I like to be able to see reason in things, and I have views that are incredibly left-wing and views that are very right-wing, because I like reason, and I like people being able to actually explain something logically to me. What's what?
You guys are just coming out of winter over there, aren't you?
Yeah, sort of. We're a month away from summer, but it's already warm. So you're already getting days of 30 degrees. So I think that's 90 Fahrenheit over there, something like that.
Oh wow.
So yeah, it's
Gotcha. Yeah, we're just going through our fall right now, so we haven't quite hit winter yet. But it's just crazy. I mean, it's like you're over there on the other side of the world on the southern hemisphere, and it's just kind of insane that you guys have a completely different environment down there. But
yeah, it's the exact opposite, man. And like where I'm from specifically is like probably the driest part of, well, I think it is the driest part of Australia, and it's like easily get in the 50s, so like you're talking like 130 sort of temperature, and it's just bloody wild.
Holy cow. Yeah, and that's Celsius, so what would that be over here? I mean, that's over 100, right?
Yeah, it's well over 50 C to F.
Something like 106.
Yeah, so 122-ish. So
oh wow, holy cow.
Gets up there, man.
Wow. So that was kind of, I mean, you were kind of used to Afghanistan heat then when you went over there already.
Yeah, Afghan was a lot different heat too. Like it's more the altitude, not the heat. And we the heat wasn't too bad. The cold was bad. The heat wasn't too bad for us.
Gotcha.
It was the first time I saw snow though. Was in Afghanistan. Like I was a 20-year-old man, and I'd never seen snow until then, until the day I flew in.
No way.
Yeah, first time.
You guys in Australia, down at the very southern parts of it, you guys do get snow from time to time, right?
Yeah. Oh, not like in the southern. It's hard. Like in Tasmania, it's like the island off the bottom of Australia. You get snow, but you'll only ever get it at altitude. Like it never snows at like anywhere not high. Like only in the mountains in places it'll snow.
Kick it off, and I guess what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kick it over to you and just kind of tell everybody who you are, what you're all about, and what you're doing these days.
Perfect, man. Yeah, well, look, thanks for talking to me today. It's always a pleasure to talk to, like-minded people and share my story. And it's something I'm not used to, is people like caring about my like story. It sounds weird, but I'm so used to being at the pub with the boys talking shit that when someone asks me like, oh, Willy, like I really want to discuss what you've done, I'm like, why? I'm just one of the boys. But I really appreciate the opportunity. I guess for those who don't know me, I'm better known as Willy, but Matt Williams, OAM. I'm a Order of Australia, Queen's Order of Australia medal recipient. And I joined the army in 2014, did a trip to Afghanistan for 8 months and 3 weeks or something long. And then after that, we'll get into all this in details, I'm guessing, but after that I was then diagnosed with a brain tumor, brain cancer on my left frontal lobe. You can sort of see my hair dips in a little bit here. It's because there's no hair grows because of a scar. And after that, I raised a couple $100,000 for cancer research, well, specifically brain cancer research. As you know, in Australia, it kills more people under 40 than any other disease, and it kills more children than any cancer in Australia. And it's sort of comparatively funding. It's not like a sexy to fund brain cancer. I think people it's not I know it doesn't have the pink ribbon or it doesn't have the blue this or that, and it's a little bit, it's significantly underfunded for what it is, and the research and I guess where you're going with, well, the prognosis from that research hasn't changed. So race for $100,000 that helped me a lot with my mental health, specifically from, being like, well, there's something I can control in this, and that part of control was actually helping the research because my illness, there was really nothing for me. And then, I was medically separated from the Defence Force, from the Army, the infantry, and I really didn't know what to do. Being an infantryman, I got into the Army when I was 18, and I was like, what do I do? I don't have any practical skills. I can shoot, I can do this, I can do that. And I was sort of a bit lost. A lot of people get this when they leave the Marines, the Army, the whatever's. And I think even more so those combat at arms guys, your tankies, your artillery, your grunts. Because what do? You can't drive a tank on the street. You can't dig a hole and sleep in it. Well, you can do that in the street, but that's not, it might not be that meaningful employment. So I went into, I guess, the conflict media space, and then that led, I guess, to you and me here today, Steve, with me going to Ukraine and filming and having, my first year of this, my first 7 or 8 months, having, a lot of success, both by luck and, putting myself in the right spot at the right time. So yeah, I guess that's me in a nutshell, and we can break down anything from there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I definitely appreciate you being on here too. I actually also want to hear about you, like your story. Like, so when you're looking at this and you're taking this outside perspective and you're looking at the human element of it, there's a lot of people, uh, such as myself, and when I was in the military and stuff, it was always about America, and it was always I just took what I was fed. I mean, was there a part of your upbringing and your childhood or something? Did you come from an open-minded family, or how did all of that start taking shape inside of you? I guess like to where you could stand back and look at humans in general and kind of be an advocate for that.
Yeah, I don't really know. I come from a family that doesn't like bullshit. Like, that's pretty open and honest family about all this and that. And, it's just why it is. I wouldn't say overly conservative family, but we were definitely on the more conservative side of politics.
Mm-hmm.
Which, 99.9% of guys who join the military are.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I can reason with anything. I like to be able to see reason in things, and I have views that are incredibly left wing and views that are very right wing. Because I like reason and I like people being able to actually explain something logically to me. And I'm open to listen to anyone. That's something that, I'll talk to anyone about anything. And I'm happy to change my mind on things. And I think that whole upbringing of you may not always be correct. You may actually have been fed a level of fake news or propaganda or whatever, and be willing to change your stance on things. And I've changed my stance on plenty of things before, and admit that I'm wrong on a lot of stuff, and try and actually just accept that, hey, look, I was wrong on this. This is actually what it is. So I don't know if it's really part of my growing up. Like, my dad's very similar to myself. But it's just, I just don't like bullshit, and I don't like lies. And I think honesty is the most important thing you can have. I think if you're honest about something, you can never really go that wrong. I really believe that if you're 100% honest on things, you can never get yourself in that much trouble. People really appreciate that, and just say it like it is. And people are too scared to do that. Just everyone, like, there's so much stuff happens in the world that 99% of people think is complete horseshit, but will never stand up against it and just be like, oh yeah, no, that's just how it is. And you're like, what? Hang on, that's bullshit. We're all sitting around in the pub yesterday saying this is fucked. But yeah, I'd just say it's my upbringing of being, really allowed to, speak my mind, and go from there. So it's a hard one of where that developed. But I'm not a journalist either. I'm not trained in this crap. I just go over with my camera and talk about what I see, and that's journalism. That's reporting. That's journalism as well. There's a fucking bomb gone off over there. Oh, okay, there was some military equipment in here. There's some people dead. Talk about it. That's journalism. I don't try and create a story. I tell a story. And what traditional journalism is that is just or reporting at least is just talking about it. Where more modern journalism is creating, not telling. They're creating something out of it where they're making up, oh, this is the reason this has happened. No, like, oh, well, this bomb went off here, so it must be this and follow this narrative. And it's like, no,
They
just talk
kind
about.
of preload. They almost get you to think in a certain direction. And like they'll show you some pictures or whatever, but they'll kind of tell you, they'll preload it with a narrative kind of to get you to start thinking in a certain direction before they
They walk
actually
in
start
there with a
talking.
narrative to have. They will go into a village that's under fire or whatever with, okay, the story we want to tell is Russia killing civilians. Right. Okay. Film anything of that. Ignore all this other shit. Ignore everything else. Film that. And you're like, hang on, like that's not what it's fucking about.
Yeah.
Film all of it.
So I was really, I guess, surprised at how quick you responded and how willing you were to just come on here and talk, because that's kind of what I'm all about. Is I just want to talk to people from all different walks of life from around the world and just kind of hear their stories. And one of the things that kind of drew me to you, I guess, is I was obviously, when this whole crazy thing kicked off over there in Ukraine and everything, you started reporting on it, and I was actually, I think I was watching you like maybe the day after that whole thing kicked
mm,
off. And one thing that struck me was that you were just more of a, you didn't so much just jump on a side right away, and it was more, you were more concerned about the human aspect of it, I guess. Um, and your concern when you kept on talking is you wanted to bring out how it was affecting people, not so much that you were like either pro-Russian or pro-Ukrainian so much as it was just like, man, look at what it's doing to people, and you even wanted to go over to Russia and and get their perspective from it. So I guess that's one of the things that really drew me to you, because that's been my just change in worldviews, I guess, as I went from being very, I guess, kind of nationalistic, only caring about the United States and my worldviews, to just being like, holy crap, like I need to start thinking about humans, and so that's really what impressed me about watching you over there. So
oh, thanks, mate. But that's what I'm trying to do too. And I think I'm not even trying. I think anyone who went over there would have, it's different if you're there working specifically for media. If you're there specifically with Al Jazeera, BBC, whatever, reporting on what's happening day to day, it's very hard to do that for a
mhm.
3-minute time slot or 30-second time slot on the news. But I would, any rational person who goes over there and sees what it's doing, and you see, I don't care if it's Russian or Ukrainian, if it's a 17-year-old boy who's been chewed up by a bloody machine gun, I guarantee you will pretty quickly drop the bullshit facade of, oh, fuck those orcs or fuck those Ukrops or whatever side you're on.
Yeah,
I don't care what side you're on. You'll drop that and be like, fuck, that's a 17-year-old boy
yeah,
who, if you think back
yeah.
when you were 17, 18, you didn't know shit about the world. You think you knew fucking nothing.
No,
Uh,
yeah,
and you've been told, hey, these people are fucking evil. Go and
right,
shoot them on both sides.
yeah,
And you've got caught in some crossfire. You got caught in artillery,
yeah,
and you've been blown apart and left there, bloody screaming till you die.
yeah,
Very quickly, you'll think, fuck, this war is the part of this war is the human aspect, because it's the old men talking, young men dying. Putin, Zelensky,
yeah,
they're talking to their leaders, blah blah blah. It's pretty easy for them to stand up and go, we're never surrendering, fucking blah, blah, blah.
yeah,
Well, those pricks aren't the one of the 1,000 people a day on the front line who are getting chewed up by some sort of artillery, machine gun, fighter jet. They're not them. And my interest is them, because at some point, very differently, but at some point I could have been that guy. I was in the infantry, and
yeah,
fucking hell, if Australia got invaded, we would have done the exact same thing. Or if Australia
yeah,
said to invade, I say to people, I'm like, fucking hell, like people in the militaries understand this, that it, if Australia said we're invading New Zealand, our closest ally, we'd be like, yeah, fuck it, we'll do it. If the armies do, if that's what the government says, it's duty.
Yeah.
You know, our hat badge, which,
Yeah.
and I've got a hat badge on me somewhere, but like this little kangaroo on the hat badge, and it says duty first, and
Yeah.
that's what it is. You put your own shit second, and it's duty first.
Yeah.
But a funny story, the kangaroo's on it. A kangaroo physically can't walk backwards because of the big tail on the kangaroo. It can only ever move forwards.
Okay.
So the infantry hat badge is known as a skippy badge. But yeah, it can only ever move forwards.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that human aspect really interests me, man.
Yeah.
And I think it interests a lot of people, and yourself, and that means a lot to me as well. So yeah, and I like to be able to go, man. And I think it's something special to talk to these people who normally would never have, I guess, their story told. And you're out in some village that's absolutely lives below the poverty line, talking to some babushka, and you're like, their stories are bloody incredible. You know, there was a lady I was talking to from a village called Zalote, which the village got absolutely flattened only about a month ago. Well, you can't go there. That's well within Russian lines now. So I do wonder still if she's alive or not. But she was telling me in one of the episodes I did about, she was going, oh, I remember when I was a little girl and my parents take me down into the basement and saying, like, be quiet, the Nazis are coming, the Nazis are coming. And then she said, and then weeks, maybe months later, my parents came back the other way. My parents took me down again and they go, oh, the Soviets are coming, be quiet, the Soviets are here. And you've had the Nazis and the Soviets. And she's going, you know, I'm 90 years old now and I don't know what to figure. Like, are the Soviets going to come back through my land? And you're like, holy shit. And this lady's there with 2 buckets of coal because there's an old abandoned coal mine in the town. That's the reason the town used to exist in the Soviet Union. But for 30 years, people like her have just been walking themselves down the coal mine to get coal to heat their stove in their house. And then being like, we're on our last few buckets, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, holy shit. Like, this is, imagine that in the States or Australia or something. Like, it's just, they are some incredible stories available out there. And I'm not enough to tell them all. I wish more people would be willing to sit down with these guys for a few hours, these guys and girls, and talk, because I see the mainstream media roll in and, you know, they roll in with their security team and their sound guy and their 3 cameramen and blah, blah, blah. Righto, who has the best story or who has the best 30-second snippet of blah? Okay, sweet. And there's no respect. There's no, there's different people I've been, you know, these old babushkas, they would not let you go. If they like you, they will not let you go without something. And they're given, and you can tell they like you because they're giving you apples or they're giving you something pickled or whatever. And you've had a genuine connection with them for about a time. And I've seen a lot of people pissed, like a lot of locals there pissed when, you know, the big mainstream media's come through and they're sort of just nipping, oh yeah, blah, 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 no, out of the way, yep, lights it up. You know, Igor, tell your story, and yep, we'll use 20 seconds of that. See ya, leave. And you're like, that's not what it's like. That's not what it's about. In my opinion, that's not what it's about.
No. And nobody, and I think that's why, which I think we'll get into that here in a little bit too, but I think that's why some of, like, people don't know where to turn to anymore to get their information, because I mean, if you just look at the main media sources, I mean, it's, you know, I'm not one of these big conspiracy theorists like that's going around America right now, but it's one of those things though where you just literally don't know or what they're telling you, if it's real, if it's true. I mean, it's just so whitewashed anymore. And you can tell, you know, I mean, they all say the same thing on a daily basis. Like, when the narratives change, they all change it at the same time. I mean, like, you know, when the referendums took hold over there, I mean, everybody, even European news agencies, United States, it was all sham referendum, like, they all changed the exact script at the same time and all started saying the same thing at the same time. And you're like, okay, well, that's not cool. I mean, it's very clear. It's very clear to see that something's going on.
But with everything, I don't want to sound like Alex Jones here, but with everything, if you want to find out the truth, follow the money. And for example, Channel 7 in Australia, which is probably our biggest channel, who's a journalist. I know some of the journalists, they're really good people, but they're explaining to me, they're like, well, a major sponsor of the news here is Toyota. And, well, what company car companies have sanctions against Russia, Toyota, and all the others, but also Toyota. That's a major sponsor. Imagine if they get on the news and have a maybe not a pro-Russian stance, but they start defending Russia. Their primary sponsor is fucking Toyota. Toyota's going to go, hey, we've just lost $10 billion of business because we've said that country's fucking evil. We've lost business because we've pulled out of that country, and we're using that as marketing. And people don't fucking bullshit me that these companies have a soul. Apple fucking uses people in sweatshops to make phones, and people jump off. They've had to put nets up out the bloody outside of these sweatshops to stop people jumping to their death to commit suicide. Don't tell me big business has a soul. Don't tell me they give a shit. All it was they were trying to limit bad PR and increase good PR, because when, McDonald's pulls out, McDonald's has killed more people than Russia and America and every bloody country involved in war. So don't tell me you've got a soul pumping kids full of bullshit chemicals. Like, fuck off. Yeah. But McDonald's, when they pull out of Russia, they limit themselves to bad PR, being like, oh, McDonald's is still there. And every news source around the world goes, oh, McDonald's has pulled out of Russia. They stand with Ukraine. And then they're sponsoring news channels and this and that. And you're like, well, they don't think they give a shit about you. This is a marketing ploy. And then the news will not go against their major sponsors, because that's how news works. And I'm not in that business, but talking to a lot of mainstream guys, like, yeah, we know it's bullshit. You talk to them at the bar, in a hotel bar somewhere in Kiev, and they're like, yeah, we know it's bullshit, but I'm getting paid, because typically journalists, they're on $1,000 a day, typically. And the independents are on nothing. They are, and they're like, but, I've got a mortgage and I've got kids, and, and they say the hardest part about journalism in a professional space is making sure you maintain and keep your job. They're like, it's not telling the story. That's not that hard, because you can just go down there and start telling it. But the hardest bit is knowing what the manager will want, what the sponsors will want, and all that, because they can't go, oh, actually, no, Russia didn't bomb this, or this civilian building that we're reporting on that Russia bombed is full of fucking military equipment with civilians in it. You can't say that, because then all these other companies are going to go, we're not fucking sponsoring that show. Well, don't air that bullshit, because we don't want people thinking Toyota are idiots for pulling out of Russian space. So, look, I'm not pro either side, but of course I condemn violence, and the ones who started the violence. The one who started the initial attack was Russia. Like, you can't, it's not something you can really argue. Like, it's throwing the first punch.
Right.
But people will absolutely forget to talk about, I guess, the history leading up to it, and then the effect on people after this, because they're making out like no Ukrainians get killed because of decisions the government makes, and that's just absolutely wrong. And no willingness to have any talks or any sort of peace deal, anything with Russia. We will not talk to them. And it's like, well, you may fucking want to, because there were times when Western troops were captured by the Taliban or blah, 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 and we sorted out, deals with them. So, it's easy to sit in your ivory tower and say, we will never talk to Russia, we'll never have a ceasefire, whatever. It's easy to do that. It's a lot harder if you're sitting on a trench getting fucking obliterated.
Before we move away from that topic, and I am going to have to rewind us here just a little bit then, but on that, before it slips my mind, I mean, so Ukraine at the beginning of it, they seemed pretty eager to go into a peace deal with Russia, right? It was all about negotiations, Now, do you think that they essentially grew balls because the West is supporting them? So now all of a sudden they feel like they might have the bargaining chips. And because of how we are supporting Ukraine and the weapons and the training and everything that we're dumping into it, that they have now kind of taken that stance where they're not willing to negotiate, they're not willing to come to any compromises. Is that because of Western influence there?
Look, definitely yes, because if there was no Western influence, Russia would have walked over Ukraine in 24 hours. You can never deny the spirit of the fighter. That's one thing. But people saying, oh, it's the spirit of the fighter, it's like bullshit. I don't care what your spirit is of a fighter is. If you don't have a fucking javelin and there's a tank coming towards you, you got no hope. It is, if it was a spirit of the fighter, why does the US Army spend tens of billions of dollars a year on marketing, not marketing, and research into R&D of equipment? That doesn't matter. And the West, the only reason Ukraine is standing is of Western weapons. Now, whether that's right or wrong, I don't really care. But countries do deserve a right to fight for their own freedom and fight for where they want to go. No problem with that. But there has been a lot of talk about Kiev in the initial days of the war, when the invasion happened the morning of the 24th of February. And there was talks on, apparently, and this is all speculation, but allegedly Kiev and the Kremlin had some level of peace deal worked out. And that the West basically said, no, you're not to do that while we're supplying you weapons and supplying you this and that. And again, like, follow the money. Like, go on whatever trade, go on Google or any trading platform and look up big business, big military companies. Look up Thales, Rheinmetall, Raytheon, companies like these giga companies, and look at their fucking share price from 2020. Well, from the fall of Kabul, they were just slipping and slipping and slipping. Look at them on the 23rd of February and look at them after the invasion. They fucking skyrocketed. America has the biggest military industrial complex in the world. America needs a war. Australia is a tiny country, 26 million people. We have 1 million people employed in defense and its industries. We've got, and you're active soldiers, and that's what people think of in militaries, active. No, like, that's less than a tenth. We have about 60,000 active guys, maybe the same in reserve. Let's say it's 100,000 all up. But then there's at least another 900,000 who work in defense industries, in building equipment, in transport, in all this. We have a massive naval industry, all of this. And America's the same. America has millions of active guys and probably in the tens of millions or maybe 10 million people who are involved in that. It will be by a mile, the biggest business in America is defense or armed stuff. We're a defense force, not an armed force. Australia, this is why Australia only doesn't have things like, well, we're not big enough, but things like aircraft carriers and things that would make us an actual armed service. Like, we wouldn't have the capability to invade and conquer a country, but we'd have the ability to defend. That's why we have to limit our numbers too. We could never have, in peacetime at least, never really have over 100,000 active soldiers, because then by some like UN law become an armed service, and countries like Indonesia would be like, why the fuck are you coming an armed service? What are you doing? But again, like, the military industrial complex, since Kabul fell, I'm not sure how much America spends on defense, but Australia's like $40 billion a year. And I think America would be somewhere in the vicinity of 500 billion. Like,
we spend more than the next top 10 nations combined. And to be honest, not to be honest, America has to justify that. Like, and with no war, there's no justification. Why do you think that we constantly say that Russia's been the bad guy for the last 40 years? Well, they were the bad guy in the Soviet Union. That was known. But we've made them the bad guy, because we need to justify that there's an enemy out there that could kill us, so we can justify 10 million people's jobs and $500, $600, $700 billion worth of taxpayers' money per year being funded into this. And if America tried to get rid of its military industrial complex, America would collapse. Like, America could not do it. You'd have 10 million people out of a job and $1 trillion a year gone. It wouldn't work. And America's getting a great deal out of this. So is all the other nations. And this is something I harp on about to people. I'm like, people going, America spent $50 billion. Yeah, well, it's only like $10, $15 on taxpayers' heads. And a lot of the equipment is old equipment that we're sending over. Australia's sending just old shit over. Some good stuff, but it's not absolute cutting edge equipment. And it's like, we're sending that over, but what we're getting back in return is our greatest sort of potential enemy was Russia. And what's happening is, we get to reduce that enemy's capability without a single NATO soldier being involved. And that's something that I don't think people understand, is the greatest threat to the West and to NATO was Russia. And what we're getting out of this in return, we're sending over some javelins and some howitzers and some
HIMARS and things like that. But what we're getting in return is not one single NATO soldier is being killed,
Right.
but we're reducing that enemy, well, that potential enemy massively. Like there's no way Russia's going to be a threat to us for 10, 20 more years. And that's what they're getting in return. And that it's been easy to sell Russia as a bad guy. Always has. Every Call of Duty game, every movie, they're Russian. Everything. And it's easy propaganda, and it's Western propaganda. I say this, that the power of the Russian army was not Russian propaganda. It may have been to a degree, but it was our propaganda. We needed to have someone powerful, and we always were, these guys could defeat us, blah, blah, blah. I can guarantee you the fucking CIA and ISIS in Australia and those intelligence services, they knew that Russia was not a threat. You know, we saw the truthful of the Russian army. Oh, these guys are pretty incompetent at what they're doing on the ground. And that was definitely overblown. There was some definitely very competent guys. There's been some incredibly successful missions by the Russians, but as a whole, fairly incompetent. And I guarantee these security intelligence agencies, they knew that, but they're like, but if we say that hey, our biggest threat is fucking, we would roll them in fucking 5 hours if we needed to.
Yeah.
Well, across NATO, across whatever, it's 100 million people out of a job, and it's a few $1 trillion that we've spent for nothing. Follow the money in this, and you're like, oh wow. But money aside, you know, I agree. Ukrainians absolutely should have the right to fight for their freedom. But people need to realize it's at a cost. And if you think that there's no Ukrainians dying day to day by the hundreds, that's bullshit. And if you think that there hasn't been Ukrainian civilians absolutely put in the firing line by this, that's also bullshit.
Kind of looking at the what these villages and stuff look like after the fighting is done and has moved on a couple kilometers. I mean, it's like the body count has to be staggering. Like, and I think that when you look at, so every time that Russia does something, whether it's an artillery strike, a missile strike, any type of thing, I mean, obviously when they find civilian graves, it's always, oh, war crimes, war crimes, war crimes. But they never document when Ukraine does it. Like, I mean, when they're trying to take back land from Russia, I mean, they're probably doing something very similar. Not to mention, if you look at America's 20-year war that we fought, I mean, there are estimates in the millions of lives that, you know, Western powers and mostly America took in Iraq and Afghanistan.
What America did in Iraq was significantly worse than what Russia has done in Ukraine, in my opinion. Look at the numbers, you know, and there's more. Russia has, and I'm not agreeing with Russia, and I don't agree that NATO is the enemy. Well, Australia is not part of NATO, but we're NATO aligned. I was part of that fucking service.
Right.
But what I say to people is, like, Russia had a lot more justification going to Ukraine, if you believe in that it's justified, than America and Australia and these countries all had going to Iraq. Mm-hmm. Iraq was on the fucking other side of the world through made up, they've got these dirty bombs. Bullshit. Again, I guarantee those intelligence, we have the best intelligence services in the world. We have spies everywhere in this. They knew that was bullshit. On the other side of the world, against an enemy that had absolutely no way ever, like, actually like fighting against us, against Saddam Hussein, who, well, since we've left, the country's gone to bullshit. You're better off having a corrupt dictator than no leader, and everyone's getting fucking killed. And we knocked that out and ruined the country for probably 100 years. What I say to people is, now, NATO's not the bad guy, in my opinion, and whatever, but people share around the world a very different opinion to that. What I say is, okay, imagine Mexico. Imagine that Mexico is looking at an arms deal with China, and that China is going to put weapons in Mexico, and China is going to sign a peace deal or a deal that will defend Mexico and move a Chinese government into power there. How fucking quickly before you think that went through would America be lining up the Marines on the border going, fuck, we cannot let China have potential nuclear weapons. NATO, if you're a NATO country, potential nuclear weapons in your country. America put multi-launch rocket systems in fucking Poland years ago said they never would, that are potentially nuclear capable. If China wanted to put not nuclear weapons, but a nuclear capable launcher through the Mexican government, I fucking guarantee there'd be Creedence Clearwater Revival fucking playing in Black Hawks within 6 hours, coming over with just fucking miniguns in the street. I guarantee it.
Yeah,
And Australia would do the exact thing if fucking New Zealand did it.
I've thought the
I'm not
exact
saying
same
that.
thing.
Yeah, and the thing is, Russia see NATO like that, and they see that land was ours 30 years ago, and that's how it is. And people don't realize that. I agree that the violence is not justified, but I sort of feel too that was Putin backed into a corner in this. Like, no one did anyone actually listen to him and take on board what was happening, and they didn't, because Minsk 1 agreement, Minsk 2 agreement were both broken by Ukraine. Now, nothing justifies invading another country,
Right.
but for fuck's sake, you can't just be that oblivious and say that, oh no, these deals have all just been cut off and there's Nazis on the border. Of course there fucking is. You've got the Azov battalion. Now, Azov battalion is of the traditional Azov is basically all gone except for those who came out of prison. But there's there are Nazis in that. Now, I'm not saying it's the majority, but yeah, there fucking are. So that's not a lie.
But there's Nazis everywhere.
There's Nazis. There are, but it's not the same. It's nowhere near the same percent.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I know Nazis in the Australian Army, but it's 1 in 1,000. Where in those regiments it's significantly more. And it's like, hang on, like, did anyone actually listen to Putin? And same as 2004, Putin applied to be in NATO, but applied Russia to be part of NATO, and we said get fucked. And you're like, well, dickheads, like, look at what's happened now. And not only, and this is just the and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I'm like, who the fuck is in charge of things going on around here? Because in the early 2000s, let's deny Russia to be part of NATO, and that would be like one of the best things to do for world peace if done correctly. Let's deny them to be that, but then let's switch all our energy resources in the next 10 years to be with the country that we denied and we're saying actively that we don't like. All our oil, all our gas, are you fucking idiot? Like, how can you not see that that's going to go wrong? Like, how could no one think that this country, which we're constantly poking and saying the bad guys, but we're going to rely on them completely with this crap? It's like, hang on, how the fuck has this happened? And Europe are going to pay the price of decisions made over the past 10 years. Well, they're paying for it now. I was in Paris only a few weeks ago. And Paris is a very cold city comparatively to places in Europe. No gas on. There's limited electricity, things like that. Things are super expensive compared to normal. And it's not even the start of winter. It's not even the beginning. Go to countries like Finland, Sweden, countries that use that gas. Even like Germany, it's fucking cold there, man. Like, and you can't turn the gas on, and people are freezing and starving. I think very quickly we're going to see in this winter, once it drops in those minus temperatures, we're going to see people going, hang on, what the fuck's happening across that border? Why can't we sort this out? People are selfish. People in this day and age are not very tough, and because you get used to life being, food comes from the fridge, and that food that fridge is filled with the supermarket. That's where food comes from. It comes in a plastic wrapper. Heat comes from this knob I turn on the wall. Yeah, that's it. And humans instinctively are selfish. No one can ever deny that, because it's a survival thing. Selfish means you'll survive. That's how we survive, just tribal people. It's just, we lived like that for 100,000 years, and we've lived like this for 300. Like, don't tell me that that we've swung around our entire biology in a few hundred years. It's bullshit. And we're selfish, and we're going to go, hang on, I'm cold and fucking hungry. Why the fuck are we sending $10 billion over there for defense? Even if it is the right thing to do, we're going to go, fuck that. I want to be warm and full. And I think it's going to come to a head very quickly once that starts happening.
Well, and I think that we could actually be negotiating peace. I think that the West could have actually played more of a intermediate in the whole thing. Like, Yeah, send them weapons
So,
and let them enable them to defend themselves. But in the meantime, pursue peace. You know, be like, hey, we're not just going to let you steamroll Ukraine, but at the same time, let's not try to keep this thing going. Like, let's actually look at what this is doing to people. Look at the effects of it in a broad spectrum when it comes to moms and, you know, relatives and all. I mean, it's affected millions of people already.
oh,
And
tens of hundreds of millions of people throughout Europe.
yeah, and it's you know, it's ruined lives. It's done. I mean, just in this last how long has it been? 8 or 9 months.
About that,
I
yeah.
mean, it's been a meat grinder over there for both sides
Oh,
and the
yeah.
civilians and just I mean, and I mean, obviously, one,
But you see plenty of examples of that, mate, where, there was a supermarket blown up that went massive early days of the war, maybe in March or April.
yeah,
And they've attacked this mall, this like supermarket, this like sort of Westfields thing. And anyone who was there, I wasn't there, but any journalist I know who was there behind closed doors, like, oh no, it was full of Ukrainian weapons. And
mm,
Russia hit it at like 5 a.m., like early hours of the morning, well before opening hours, in the hope to reduce civilian casualties there. Why else would they hit it with Caliber missiles at 4 or 5 a.m. and it's full of weapons? But did that get told? No. What got told was they bombed a shopping center full of civilians. That's what. And when I knew this was bullshit is when I heard it, and they said they've bombed a shopping center with Caliber missiles. What a fucking cruise missile! They're massive,
mhm,
and there's 10 civilian deaths. And I'm like, bullshit. If you fucking bombed bomb a shopping mall with a Caliber missile that's full, you're gonna kill hundreds.
yeah,
Like you are gonna kill fucking hundreds of people. Like those create a crater, man, that would be
well,
25 meters across. It'd be 70 feet across. They're insane.
but
Um,
everybody knows what a caliber is, so every missile that comes in is a caliber. Every
yeah,
shoulder fired, you know, is a anti-tank weapon is a javelin.
and
Like
every
it's
gun's an AR-15.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But it's just what it was, and it was like, hang on. And you look into it and you're like, well, anyone who's there, and I know journalists was like, oh yeah, no, there's weapons there, but we didn't take photos of that because that didn't fit. And I'm like, that's your fucking job. Like you should be fired for that. Like if I was a manager of journalists and there was weapons here, but no, that doesn't fit, I'd be like, you are fucking lying. This is not your job. Fuck off. But it's just how it is with a lot, man.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
there are some gruesome attacks that are completely just like don't get me wrong, I'm not defending Russia's attacks on the middle of the city. Like at the
Right.
moment, yesterday morning, I think it was, they completely just flattened all the electricity grid in Kiev.
Hmm.
Like, hang on, you don't even have soldiers within 1,000 kilometers of Kiev, except for in Belarus, I guess. But you're doing this just to put the hurt on. But it's war, and it's horrific, and it's fucking hard. But
Yeah.
I think what they're doing is they're just trying to make it so uncomfortable for the civilians that eventually the civilians go, we need to have some way out of this. You live in the cold, you live in the dark long enough, you'll think, fuck this.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I mean, you know, once again, I mean, bombing, you know, and knocking out the power grid, I mean, that's a hell of a lot better than, you know, hitting, you know, housing complexes and stuff like that and making
Mm.
it miserable that way. I mean, I'd much rather see him hit the electric grid there. But I mean, and once again, I'm the same way. Like, I mean, if I was forced to choose a side, which I don't want to, I mean, I would sit there and be like, well, you know, I mean, Ukraine, they're kind of forced into defending themselves at this
Yes,
point,
of course.
but it's still, I mean, I don't know. The whole thing is just kind of disgusting. I guess to me it was kind of shocking. I don't know why, as an American after 20 some years of war, that I would be shocked at that, you know, two developed nations could go at it like this. You know, it was just a little bit, I guess, disgusting to me to see. But yeah, I don't know.
It
I
is.
guess to me it just kind of it makes me a little bit sick, I guess. But
And I think if it doesn't, if you're a person sitting back, just, oh, this is just the way of the world, I'm like, no, that's more concerning. If you're not disgusted by two developed nations going head to head in a meat grinder of men, if you're not
mhm,
disgusted by that, you've got a fucking problem. Like
yeah.
sorry to tell you, go and see someone.
Yeah. And it would have honestly, I mean, you know, at a certain point, you actually have to wonder, is it worth it? Like, I mean, is it honestly worth it for Ukraine to continue like this? Because even if they lose, like the Donbass and stuff like that, like, I mean, if there's people there, and I don't know, I guess that's where your opinion. I mean, are there a lot of people over there in eastern Ukraine that want to be Russian, and would it
Yeah.
actually? What's that?
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah. Like, the people, whoever's left in the Donbass as a civilian currently,
They want to
he
be.
wants to be Russian.
Yeah.
Why would you stay in a village that's been under attack for 7, 8 months? No work, constant shelling. They're all, well, not all. The vast majority who are left out there are pro-Russian sympathizers. Absolutely, 100%. And I remember, man, I've been some places right on the front line, and you've got like the village, and then 200 meters out, you'll have the start of the Ukrainian trench system. And all the villages are pro-Russian, and there's an element of like, why the fuck is that trench system? This town hates you. This town is calling in your locations. They're sporadically firing at their window at you. This is why you have to be very careful as a journalist in those towns, because they see you as pro-Western, pro-Ukrainian media.
Yeah.
Why are you like? I'm like, fuck that. If my mates are all dying for this town behind me that hates us, that are calling in bombs on us, I'd move these fucking trenches 200 meters behind the town. Oh yeah, mate. But even before the war, there was a lot of people in Ukraine. It's not the majority, but there was a lot of people in Ukraine who wanted to be under Russia. A lot of them. Yeah.
I mean, so do you think it would be that difficult to actually come to some kind of an agreement and say, you know what, Russia, you guys, let's even draw the lines where our battlefronts are right now, where the battle line is right now. You guys keep Crimea. These people kind of want to be Russian for the sake of not losing another 100,000 people. Like, I mean, do you actually think that there would be some kind of a peace thing that could work out along those lines? And do you think Russia would hold to it? Do you think Ukraine would hold to it? I mean,
I think we're too deep now to do it. I think there's been too much cost to now do that. In the beginning, they should have done that, because in the beginning they should have had, in my opinion at least, they should have gone like, the Donbass was held by Russia anyway since 2014. And Crimea, sorry, you're never getting Crimea back. Like, there might be some. Russia need Crimea. They need that land bridge into the Black Sea. Russia, in my opinion, would rather nuke Crimea itself than lose it. And the whole Russian Navy will just sit there and bomb the shit out of it. There might be some attacks on the bridge. There may be this, maybe that, whatever. But as far as taking back that land, in my opinion, not going to fucking happen. When it's 20% of your land, I completely agree and sympathize that Ukrainians should not have to give up an inch of their land. I agree with that. But you also need to see it from the perspective of, yeah, you shouldn't have to, but there's thousands of people dying a day and billions of dollars being spent, and the human cost and all of this.
After all, this is what nations have done for thousands. I don't mean to keep talking over you like that, Willy.
No, of course not. But nations do that. That's what nations do. They conquer land like that. And the days of that are gone. Well, they should be gone. But the only rebuttal to that is Ukraine need to almost continue fighting now, because Russia I talked to a guy, and his perspective was Russia has won this war already, and they won it in the first few days. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, no, that. And he goes, well, do you really think the EU and NATO, they may say we'll take on Ukraine? Do you really think they're going to in a short term? No way. Like, the EU, Turkey has been, since the mid-90s or mid-2000s, Turkey has had an application for EU membership going, and they haven't. They've never accepted Turkey for the EU, been in NATO. Do you really think that Ukraine, with being the most corrupt country in Europe, and that's something people don't talk about, it's still the most corrupt country in Europe, that is in a war or just out of a war, do you really think that even if the war ends tomorrow, that NATO, and remember, to have NATO membership, EU membership, every country has to say yes to you joining. He's going to say, we're going to take on this debt and responsibility that suddenly, if Russia do something, the whole world's involved. He said it might be not. He might let them have, they've applied for UN nomination status, whatever it is, but actually accepting them, probably not. And it's a bit sad, because that's the carrot we're dangling. But what he said is, like, Russia has done $1 trillion or more of damage to Ukraine. Ukraine before the war had a GDP of $100 billion a year, and that has been reduced by like 70%. And not only has it been reduced to that, all the young people have left. All the kids are in the EU. All the women are in the EU. Well, not all, but a lot. In the like 10 million. They're not coming back. They've been given a 3-year visa. Everyone, Ukrainians, like a lot of Ukrainian women, particularly, their goal was to leave Ukraine. Where do you think the whole mail order bride thing comes from? Like that happens. That's true. What his point was that Russia has managed to do $1 trillion of damage to Ukraine, around about that. Could be more, could be a bit less. Of a country that's GDP currently could be maybe 40 or 50 billion. With inflation, that's not 20 years of recovery. That's 100 years of recovery with inflation and whatever, and that damage and no young people. Do you really think people in Ukraine are going to be trying to have babies at the moment? No. Like, it's little things like this that they're like, a lot of young people leave. A lot of you'll see remnants of this. You might actually see the effect on Ukraine now, but you're going to see the effect of if you just don't have children for 2 years in a country or a limited amount. You see that very quickly. You don't see it quickly. You see it very slowly. But in 10, 20 years, you're like, holy shit, there's no one here. No one's working. And the damage is still everywhere. It's crazy.
Do you think this is going to backfire on the West, like on Europe and on the United States? Like, are we just creating another kind of an enemy with the people that are there? Because eventually, I mean, I'm a firm believer that, your find out level is directly going to correspond with your fuck around level, so at some point in time, you're gonna find out. Like, the more we keep messing around and stuff like this, I mean, and when we're using essentially Ukraine to fight a NATO war for us without actually having to lose our own guys, without spilling our own blood, I mean, they're eventually they're gonna see that, and I'm sure there already are people that do. And when they're not going to be welcome in NATO after this, I mean, some shit's probably going to happen, right? I mean, as far as like tempers are going to flare, I mean, I don't know, Ukraine's probably not going to be able to do anything after this, but shit, I mean,
well, there's a lot that has to happen too. Like, Ukraine, you can't join NATO if you're a country under active conflict. So the conflict needs to end before they can even think about it. Right. The videos of President Zelensky signing paperwork, it means I can print something out and fucking sign it. Like, if you're a country under current war, you cannot join. So it's not going to happen now. Right. And countries like Turkey are probably going to go no once it does come through, Turkey and NATO. And I think, we could shoot ourselves in the foot. And what's going to happen, and I think what a lot of people are going to be, I don't know, pissed off about, but is going to happen definitely, is imagine the war ends tomorrow and there is a deal with NATO membership coming. The West is going to have to say, especially Europe, is going to have to go, even if they're going to accept into NATO, you need to clean out these militia groups in the East. These militia groups who are the good guys at the moment because they're fighting for Ukraine. Okay, no worries. But you have armed militias, and properly armed militias, not these dickheads with AKs and ARs. No. These are militias that we've given armored vehicles. We've given javelins. We've given NLAWs. We've given training to. They're the good guys now, but you cannot have a NATO country with free reign militias out there. You can't fucking have that. Australia's not a NATO country, but any NATO country can't just have beside the army, just have these other guys who are operating as whatever's and that's where I think it's going to backfire, or not backfire, but there'll be a big thing of like, hang on, these Azov guys were heroes back in the day in Mariupol and places like this. And for NATO membership, you need to go and take them out. And don't think that they're going to lay down their weapons. Don't think for a fucking second that these, the Kraken battalion, the Azov battalion, guys like these, who are, very famous fighters, don't think that the NATO membership, and if NATO go, those guys need to put down their arms. Don't think they're going to do that. There'll be another internal war in Ukraine. Like, it's going to be a fucking mess, mate. Either way it goes is a fucking mess. And should have we got involved or not? Well, that's well above my pay grade, and something that is just going to happen one way or another. So, it's not really worth thinking about that. But in the future, this is not good. This is something that's going to go massive. It's going to get way, way worse. It's going to get way worse before it gets better. And we're seeing it get worse now with Russia, for example, taking up power grids and things along those stances. It's going to get way worse before it gets better. And at what human cost? What human cost are we willing to put up with to see before a peace deal signed? That's what I think it is. And it's like, how bad is it going to get before we do? And is it going to be people freezing in the street, no food, dying? Maybe it will.
And I think that's the big thing here too, is that at some point in time, like right now, Americans, we're so fucked right now with our politics and everything right now that I honestly don't think half of the people here really know exactly what's going on over there. And I don't really think that I'm not saying that they care, but if they start feeling it in the money, that's when Americans are going to start to care. And I think
people have short memory spans and giving a fuck, mate. Like, how many Black Lives Matter flags did you see 2 years ago at this time? Everywhere. Everyone's profile picture, everyone's fucking had these flags. When do you see them now? Fucking never. How long do you see Palestinian flags for? Fucking a little bit all the time, and that's it. Yeah. How long do you see Iranian flags for? Women are being dragged out and murdered in Iran every single day for not wearing a hijab. Yeah. You saw it for a day or two, then no one gives a fuck. Think of everything like this.
Yeah.
And I was talking on another podcast about this, about you're starting to see those profile pictures of the yellow and blue start changing back to their photo. You're starting to see this happening, and people still say to people like I'll get introduced to, this is Matt. He just got back from the Ukraine. Oh, is that still going on? And that's what it's like. When I was in Afghanistan, and I was pretty late in the war. Oh, Afghanistan, Australia's still there, and that's what it's like. Everyday people like you and I are interested in this stuff and care. The average person doesn't. I wish I didn't give a shit, to be honest. I wish I was.
It would be a little bit easier, wouldn't it?
Life would be great if you're just naive to, food comes from the fridge, and money comes from the bank, and the government just does the thing, and I go to the hospital and I drive on the roads. I wish I was that naive, because life would be a lot more peaceful and happy. But when you're looking into this, but don't think that you and I are the norm, because our Instagram is full of Russia-Ukraine war stuff. That's algorithm feeding it to us because we like that. We physically click like on it or whatever, or watch it. So, he likes this, feeds it. But if you're just a regular person on social media, your algorithm's not sending you anything. You don't know that it's happening. But what you will know is, fucking hell, it's expensive to fill up with gas at the Bowser, and fucking bread's expensive. What the fuck is this point? This bullshit,
Well, that's the thing, is that people are too concerned right now. And once again, I'm talking. It sounds like I'm talking a lot of shit on America. I mean, this is my country, and I also served in the military. But it's just the truth, the way that it is. But I mean, people right now, they're more concerned about the upcoming elections, and they're more concerned, saying that, well, gas was cheaper under Trump and this, that, and the other thing. Most people, unless it falls into their conspiracy theory that they believe right now, they really don't give two shits about what's going on halfway around the world. And that's the scary part to me, because people pretend. Okay, guys, that's where I'm going to have to leave you for today. I am going to put out episode 2. I don't know when I'm going to put that out, either later this week, but probably next week. I'll probably put out episode 2 on Wednesday of next week. I am having to break this up because we sat for like 2 hours just talking about this stuff, and he has a lot more. And I don't want to sit here and dump all 2 hours on one video. It's too much for most people to watch in one sitting anyways. So it will also, hopefully let you guys know what you're in for next week as well. So I would suggest that if you are into this type of a conversation and you want to see what else Willy has to talk about, because he goes into a lot more stuff, not just on Ukraine, but just in things in general.
And he gets into a little bit about his life too, with the brain tumor and everything like that. So I would suggest, if you want to see this next week, please like, please subscribe. And obviously I look forward to seeing more of Willy and myself. I'm probably going to do some other interview with him down the road yet. But anyways, this is where I'm going to leave you guys for this week. I hope you guys tune in next week, and we will continue this conversation then. Have a good one.